Hi, I'm Kathie from Stitch It Together. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be working on a quilt that I created in EQ8 called Mayflowers. This is a project that I designed because I have some fabrics left over from a Joann find. As you know, they're going out of business, and I bought a whole bunch of fabric and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I started one quilt last month and I used some of it, but I have quite a bit of it left. So in designing this quilt, I was designing around that factor. I also wanted something that was fast. I didn't want to spend a lot of time in designing or in its construction. So in mind, when I was designing this, thinking about techniques where I could put this together quite quickly, and I think I've done that. So if you follow along, I'm going to be using some methods that are a little unlike me. I like a lot of precision. I like to square as I go, and I am going to do that. But there's a little fuzziness in this one so that I can employ some really fast techniques to put it together. Again, thank you for joining me. So I'd like to show you how this quilt is going to go together. And the first part of this video is going to show you how the flower blocks go together. There are 16 flower blocks. I'm going to be using 4 different fabrics. So for me, that means I'm going to make 4 blocks of each color. You will need, again, 16 altogether. And to start with, you're going to need 4.5-inch squares. For me, with 4 fabrics, that meant I needed to have 16 of each color that I was going to use. Again, these are 4.5-inch squares. Then you're going to need 64 of the yellow 2.5-inch squares that go in the center of the flower, 2.5-inch squares. And then you're going to need 64 of your background color. For me, it's going to be white. And these are 2-inch squares. I want to take a little of a note right now. I'm going to be showing you with a white background, but 4 of these blocks will be shifted just a little bit because of a color. They're going to have green in the background to mimic the grass. So you'll have to look at the picture. Again, I'm going to show you with a white background, but 4 of these blocks will be modified just a little bit by using a green background instead of the white. You'll need to use white for the petal blocks. In this block, always will be white, but for the second portion, it will be green for 4 of the blocks total. So let me show you what I'm talking about. This is a finished block. They're going to be 12.5 inches unfinished, which means 12 inches finished. And when I'm talking about the background, for 4 of these blocks, the white right here and the white right here is going to be green. And that's how you would modify it. But the background will always be white in the petal blocks. So let me show you how we're going to do this. You're going to take one of your 4.5-inch squares. And again, you're going to need 4 for each of your blocks. And you're going to start by putting them into the corners. Where's my block? Here it is. Okay. And you might need to pin them. You're going to put 1 yellow block in one corner and 1 white block in the other corner. Then you're going to draw diagonal lines as you've seen right here. You might need to pin them. You might not. It just depends on the person. Sometimes I pin mine. This was pretty grippy fabric, so in this case, I didn't really need to pin them. But I did, in fact, put the lines on. This is darker than I usually would do, so you can see it. But I did draw lines so that I would get my sewing correct. And let me describe how you need to sew this. So you're going to draw your diagonal lines just like this, but you're going to want to sew just inside on this side of that line. And this is why, because when you're done sewing it, you need to fold the corner back like this. And if you've sewn exactly on the line, you don't have any really room for folding, and you will not meet the corner, because what you're trying to do is end up with a perfect square again. And if you don't go right inside of that line or on this side of the line, you won't quite cover your square. So if you do that, and then when you press, if you try and line those corners up, I think that if you've gone just a little on the outside of that line, you'll see it's going to be a lot easier to get these perfect squares again. So again, this is what you're going to do. You're going to put your corners in the corner, and a word about that. It does not really matter if you put the yellow in the left or the right corner, but you absolutely must be consistent. And what I mean is, if you start with the yellow in the left-hand corner and the white in the right-hand corner. All of the blocks for that flower block need to be done this way or it won't go together correctly. Now you can shift them within colors, but you can't shift them within blocks. They all have to be consistent within the block. So after you sew your diagonal lines, you're going to fold up your corners and you'll iron them like this. But now you've got a lot of layers. And so what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to cut off the corners. Be careful you don't cut the wrong ones off. So I like to fold them back this way again when I get to do the cutting so that I don't mistakenly cut the wrong section off. And you will end up with something that looks like this. So that's what you want to do. Then you're going to have 4 of these. And if you will put them into a 4 patch, just like you would sew a 4 patch, with the yellow in the center, you will end up with a block that looks like this. Just like this. The next step, you're going to need to have 2 8.5 by 4.5 inch strips. And you are going to sew them so that they look like this. And I know it's going to look a little silly. It kind of looks like a heart, right? So you have this empty space right there. And then what you're going to do is from this corner right here, you're going to measure up 3 7/8 of an inch. And then from this corner right here, right there, you're going to measure up 3 7/8 of an inch. And you are going to, now I have drawn a line, but you are going to cut across that area so that you have a 1/4 inch from your seam. There is a 1/4 inch there, and it goes to right where the fabric is starting to be missing. And so you will end up having something that looks like this instead. You will just cut away that fabric and it will look like this when you're done. And then you're going to set that aside. Next, you're going to make a 4 patch using your background color and the color that you're going to be using for your stems and leaves. And those are 4.5 inch squares. You're going to need to make 8 of these squares, and then you're going to cut them in half. So you'll end up with 16. So you're going to go ahead and just make a regular 4 patch. And when I put this together, I like to nest my seams. So when I did that, I pressed with the fabrics going to the dark fabric, and then they nested together just perfectly. But then with that last one, you're going to find that these next steps are going to be a lot easier if you press that last seam open so that it will look like this. And what you're going to do next is you are going to cut all the way down the white section, the white, not the green. We're going to get to the green, but you're going to cut it directly in half. And you are then going to take a 1 inch strip by about 14 inches, and you're going to sew it back together with that strip so that it's going to start looking like this. You'll have half the block. When you cut it in half, it will look like this. And then you're going to sew a strip so that you have ends extending. So it's gonna look like this. And then what you're going to do is you're going to turn the block around so that you're looking at the back. And you're going to find the center of that of the triangles right here. You're going to find the center, and you're going to go up into your 1 inch strip, and you're going to mark that center so clearly that you can see it. Then you're going to take your other corner, the other half of that same block, and you're going to match up those centers. And I do suggest that you use a pin, and you put that in there. And you're going to sew, again, you're using scant 1/4 inch seams. Again, I want to say with the scant 1/4 inch seams. I like to be just a little bit off so that I have a little room to square up as I go. Now with this block, you don't want to square to the end because you can see this is the fuzzy part of the stuff that we're doing. And you were not going to want to square these up until we get to the end. But when I've been doing this, since I'm sewing just a little smaller than a 1/4 inch, I have had a pretty faithful 12.5 inch square by doing that way. But back to this. So now you're going to sew this together, and you're going to end up with something that looks like this. You're going to have the ends extending. See how it points out? You're going to need to square those up. And then once you square those up, you're going to cut this in half again. And this time you're going to go through the green leaf blocks. Oops. You're going to cut them directly in the center, and you will have 2 blocks that look like this. Now you're going to sew that to your flower block. and you're going to match up those centers. So you have your flower block that looks like this. Remember, you've cut it off, so it looks like that. And you're going to go ahead and you're going to match up the centers to the centers. And then when you sew it, so it'll look like that when you're getting ready to sew it. And then when you sew it all together, it's going to look like this. And this is when you're done, you're going to want to make sure that your seams are flat. You're going to want to then try and square up your blocks. And if you need to make them a little smaller, you can. But mine, the method I've been using, have been pretty faithful to being 12.5 inches. So I hope that you'll watch the next video when I show you how to make the background and sunshine squares. Thank you for watching.